Have you ever believed that blood ties were the only place that could offer you a safe harbor, only to one day realize that it was those very people who pushed you down into the abyss of doubt and betrayal? Let me take you into the story of Emily Parker, a woman who was disowned by her own family, yet found strength in the pain and rediscovered herself in the betrayal that once seemed unforgivable. This is not just a story about money and cold numbers, but a journey to reclaim freedom and dignity for someone who was once crushed by lies. Listen closely to every word to understand that sometimes family is not where you belong, but merely the place where you learn how to step away and find yourself. On that Thanksgiving day, Emily Parker returned to the house where she had once taken her very first steps, carrying with her a pumpkin pie infused with the sweet aroma of the recipe her mother Linda had always guarded like a family treasure. 3 hours of driving through the cold, misty fog, her heart glimmering with hope that this time everything would be different. The harsh stares would soften, the reproaches would give way to love. But when the door swung open, the familiar kitchen transformed into a cold courtroom. Her father, Richard, stood there, his voice as dry as rotting wood. "Return the $50,000, Emily, or don't ever come back here again." Those words fell like the slash of a sharp knife, cutting through the sweet scent of the pie and shattering every hopeful illusion Emily had carried. Olivia, her younger sister, looked up, mascara smudged, but her eyes as cold as ice, showing no hint of sympathy. Daniel, the brother who had once been her only ally, only lowered his head, his hand clenched around his fork, as if afraid his conscience might force him to speak. Emily stood frozen, her hands still gripping the pie tray like a feeble shield against the silent storm of betrayal. No one asked her a single question. Did you really do it? They didn't need an answer, they had already reached their verdict. In that moment, Emily realized the pie she had brought, the long journey, and all the fragile faith she had carried, they had all been reduced to bitter humiliation. It was no longer Thanksgiving, no longer a home, just an airless room filled with the scent of an elegant dinner but utterly hollow, and a girl still clutching her warm pie, standing amidst people who had decided to abandon her long ago. Emily left the house with the sound of wind whistling through the bare trees, her hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. The pumpkin pie, a gift of goodwill and memory, still sat quietly on the passenger seat, its sweet scent a bitter reminder of everything she had once trusted, once hoped for. As the car rolled down the deserted road, streetlights passed over her face, casting fleeting shadows across the lines of anguish and the eyes now dry after a storm of tears. Emily didn't know how long she had been driving, only that she stopped in front of a roadside motel, a place she had driven past hundreds of times, but never imagined she would step into. The smell of damp, worn carpet hit her nose as she pushed open the door, a scent of forgotten dreams and nameless memories. She set the pie down on the old wooden table, staring at it quietly like it was a silent witness to everything that had just collapsed. There was no laughter of family, no warmth of hugs or tender looks. Only a heavy silence and a girl curled up on the edge of the bed, her back hunched as if trying to make herself smaller in this unfamiliar space. Olivia's message came like another blade carving into a wound that hadn't yet closed. "You've made everything so unbelievable, Emily. No questions, no concern, just a cold accusation." Emily read the message, her hand trembling, before she placed the phone face down as if she didn't want to let any more words into a mind already crowded with fragments. She closed her eyes, feeling her breath shallow and her thoughts spinning. How many years spent trying to prove herself? How many times swallowing tears to preserve a family that had been rotting for so long, all of it now just an illusion. But in the cold emptiness of that temporary room, where the dim yellow light fell across a crack in the wall, Emily realized one thing: she was still whole. Not because of them, not to reclaim a place in a home that had stopped welcoming her long ago, but because of herself, for the girl inside, who was exhausted but refused to break. That night, in the rhythm of her own breathing, Emily made a quiet promise. No matter how dark the road ahead would be, she would keep moving forward alone, but no longer afraid. The next morning, as the first rays of Portland's sun crept through the hotel window, Emily opened her eyes and found that she was no longer the trembling, lost figure of the night before. The long night had wrung out the last of her tears, leaving a space just big enough for a cold, clear focus. She knew she couldn't stay here in this place where four musty walls couldn't mask the scent of betrayal that had seeped into every breath. As an experienced forensic accountant at Baxter and Associates, she knew that money never disappears, it only changes direction, and it always leaves a trail. Emily pulled out her laptop from the bag that had traveled with her through countless work trips, her fingers flying over the keys as she began to trace the data the numbers she had once used to protect others now wielded to protect herself. In the pale blue glow of the transaction monitoring software, she saw the outline of a family she had once believed was her shelter. 3 large cash withdrawals each on days when Olivia had still smiled at her with complete confidence. She drew a quiet breath, her hand steady every keystroke, a firm heartbeat declaring the truth would no longer be hidden. She reached out to Ian, her trusted colleague, the one who had stood by her in unmasking so many frauds in those tangled financial investigations. Ian, she murmured, her voice still holding its strength, even as her heart quivered, help me trace every suspicious transaction from Greenwell Mutual. Just an hour later, her email inbox chimed the subject line blazing 3 in-person withdrawals. No online activity perpetrator is someone in the family. Emily stared at the screen, a wave of dizziness rising up but leaving no room for tears, only for fury and resolve. She knew what she was about to do would change everything. It would shine a light on the truth, but it would also burn away the last illusions of what she had once called home. She printed every bank statement, every number, every signature laid bare like an undeniable confession. In the stillness of the hotel room, Emily sat with her back straight, her gaze distant yet ablaze like a fire newly stoked. She was no longer the fragile girl of the night before, no longer the daughter cast out from her family's doorstep. She was Emily Parker, the one who dared to stand in the middle of a room full of lies and declare, "The truth will not be silenced." And for the first time in years, Emily felt truly free, free to stare directly into the darkness and to walk right through it. Returning to the house where it had all begun, Emily walked through the iron gate with its peeling paint as if it too were screaming out the secrets hidden behind those red brick walls. In her hands was no longer a sweet pie, but a thick stack of documents, silent papers that screamed the truth. Her mother, Linda, opened the door with clouded eyes, her hands trembling as if she could already feel the storm rolling in. Emily stepped inside without a greeting, without a single tender glance exchanged, only a heavy silence, thick and congealed like a layer of fat on a pot of cold soup. She set the file down on the old wooden table, the same table where that Thanksgiving dinner had taken place, where she had once stood mute beneath their accusations. The sound of the paper sliding across the wood cut through the air like a blade. Olivia and Daniel emerged from the living room, their eyes flickering briefly with unease, before freezing into practiced masks of indifference. Emily didn't give them time to prepare. Her voice rose steady, unwavering, without a single note of pleading, 3 large cash withdrawals. Not online. Exact dates and times. The security cameras at Greenwell Mutual don't lie, only people do. Olivia's face went pale, her hands twisting together beneath the table. Daniel flushed red, his lips pressed into a line as if he feared one word would bring the whole wall of lies crashing down. Emily turned page after page, each piece of evidence landing like a knock on the hollow door of their false pride. Her mother, face ashen, lifted a hand to her mouth, as if to hold back a sob. But Emily didn't stop. She had been silent long enough. "This is your signature, Olivia," she said, her voice calm and measured, each word carved into the air. And here, Daniel, your handwriting still looks exactly like it did in grade school, only this time it's not on a detention slip. It's on the truth of our own family. No one answered. The room filled with the ticking of the wall clock, and Emily knew no apology could ever fill the void they had carved into her heart. But she didn't need an apology. Emily looked at them, these people who had once been her entire world, and realized this moment was the key that unlocked her from the invisible chains of blind loyalty. In the pale yellow light, she saw the quiet collapse in their eyes and the freedom flickering to life in her own. Not a victory, just the end of a lie that had gone on too long. And Emily knew that was enough for her to walk out of this house for the last time, like someone who had closed the chapter for good, no longer afraid. Emily rose slowly, gathering the stack of documents, each sheet now exposing the sins her family had tried so hard to hide behind those polite holiday meals. Her mother Linda softly called her name in a trembling voice, as if trying to cling to something that had long since slipped from her grasp. But Emily simply looked at her mother, her eyes no longer colored with despair, only a quiet sorrow that those who betray can never touch. She didn't say a word, didn't scream out accusations, didn't demand any pity, because Emily knew that in this moment she had claimed back the only thing they had never truly given her, her own freedom. She handed the file to the family lawyer, the man whom Linda had once trusted like a fortress, who now stood as the gatekeeper to the truth. "The rest is yours?" she said softly, her voice as calm as a still lake on a silent night. The lawyer lowered his head, his eyes reflecting a quiet regret that her family hadn't yet recognized. Emily turned and walked out into the hallway, the quiet click of her shoes echoing each steady beat of a heart that had finally found peace after so many stormy seasons. She took nothing with her. No memories, no explanations, no questions of why. Everything she left behind the house that had once sheltered her, now nothing more than a hollow shell filled with the sighs of those who couldn't face themselves. As she crossed the threshold, Emily drew in a deep breath, feeling the winter air like a cold wave against her skin, but she didn't shrink back. Instead, she stood tall, her eyes wide open to the shimmering light of the late afternoon sky. She knew they would have to face the consequences, each number, each security frame, each signature etched like an inescapable mark. But that was no longer her burden. Emily walked on carrying only one conviction she had chosen, the only path her dignity would allow, leaving behind what was no longer worthy of her to find a quiet place no longer tainted by lies. And in that step she felt something she had lost for far too long, not money, not family, but herself, with a heart still whole and a pride no one could ever shatter. Emily returned to her small apartment in downtown Seattle, a peaceful space where she had chosen each curtain, each potted plant, each wooden chair with care. The soft yellow light reflected off the ceiling, illuminating her face in the mirror. No longer the quiet girl at those family dinners, but a woman who had stitched her own wounds back together with unwavering hands. Her phone rang, the screen lighting up with the name Mom, and Linda's voice came through in broken sobs, apologizing, remorseful, as if a single word could draw her back. But Emily only smiled faintly, not because there was no love left, but because she knew her love no longer had a home in that house. She looked out the window, the city sparkling like stars, lighting the hopes of travelers. In her small apartment, Emily sat at her desk, the dim light glinting off the old stack of files now turned over to the lawyer. She exhaled deeply, her heart no longer heavy the way it had been on those sleepless nights. In the distance, she heard the wind whistling through crowded streets, the sound of car horns, footsteps of strangers, all of it, like a wordless song echoing the freedom she had always yearned for. In the days that followed, she didn't rush to move forward, nor did she run away. Quietly, she enrolled in a community program teaching seniors how to manage their finances and protect themselves from fraud. Every afternoon, in the pale gray winter light, Emily sat in that small room surrounded by elderly faces, their eyes lighting up as they learned how to read numbers they'd once thought forever out of reach. In their eyes, Emily saw herself again, and she knew she was no longer alone. When night fell, Emily poured herself a cup of hot tea, the scent of chamomile filling the small room. She opened her laptop, the pale blue light washing over her resolute face. Tonight, no one could tear apart her trust again. She told herself that those who had spun lies would have to walk through the darkness they'd created, and as for her, she would walk her own path, no looking back, no regrets. Emily Parker, after all the wreckage, still had one thing: left herself whole and free, as she had never been allowed to be. And in the glittering Seattle night, she knew that was the greatest gift life could give her. Emily sat by the window, the last light of the Seattle sunset stretching long across the rain-soaked streets. In the quiet of her small apartment, she rested her forehead against the cool glass, taking a deep, steady breath. Each wound had closed, leaving space for peace and the pride of someone who had learned to stand again after everything fell apart. Now she no longer needed anyone's recognition or approval. Emily had learned a costly lesson: nothing is more valuable than the truth, and no one has the right to decide your worth except you. If you too carry doubts in your heart, if you're wondering about the meaning of honesty, trust, and dignity, let Emily's story be a reminder. Never let anyone make you question your own worth. Share this story if it resonates with you, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can keep seeking out new journeys together, where even in the face of rejection or betrayal, you'll find the strength that's always been yours.